So it's great to see you all. It's almost the end of the school year. I hope you can taste it. I hope you're envisioning whatever summer staycation or vacation you have planned. And so from today's agenda, we wanted to bring you back to this idea of we're really in the reimagine phase, right? We're trying to get into that space of creativity, thinking outside the box about what is possible in our classrooms and in our schools. And I pulled a quote from the end of chapter 4 about safe to fail experiments. Safe to fail experiments are your friend at this time, small 4 to 6 week hacks that disrupt business as usual and give you fresh street data to study. You have done some listening at the margins, you began to uncover underlying patterns and root causes, and then begun to reimagine or even flip the table to center and collaboratively design with students at the margins. So give yourself permission to try something new now. This is the spirit we want to take into today as we reflect on your first foray into cogens and kind of set you up to go back into that structure and really leverage it as a space to reimagine with students. You'll notice we have 4 intentions for today. And what I would love for you to do is read those and put into the chat the number of the intention that is most meeting you where you are at as an adult learner in this community. So I'm talking about these guys. Thank you, Adeseli, for getting us started. So clarifying what types of shifts you might be trying within the venue of the cogen. Awesome. That's something we've had a lot of conversation about. Another 3 from Winter. Yeah, I think that we probably didn't do quite enough scaffolding around that last time. That's one of our reflections. And so we'll kind of come back to that today. Another 3. Okay, good. So what are we trying to accomplish with the cogen? What's the purpose? What would success look like? Really trying to get sharp around that. And as always, right, we're going to take the time that it takes to do this with quality. So one of the invitations or asks we're making today is that we can add one last session, because in trying to move through this with you all, we realized like it's just not enough time, right? We just actually need more time to do justice to this process. I see a 2, connect the dots. Thank you, Erin. And then a couple of 4s. What would it look like? How can students help you figure out what you're tracking in the cogen in the classroom? Awesome. So yeah, we're going to slow it down a little bit today. And so a reminder that we have our anchor agreements we always come back to. And I want to invite you to take a moment and really notice just where you're at today. Notice what you're carrying in your body, if you have points of tension. If you were to put a feeling state on where your body and your heart is at right now, what would that be? You don't have to say it out loud, just to yourself. And then which of these agreements can help you really show up and be present today? I'm going to give myself, we can't be articulate all the time because I'm a little under the weather, and just going to be the best I can be for you all. And so take a moment and think about which agreement for you will help you stay present. Okay, so with just a few minutes before we move to this next piece, want to call a couple of witnesses. So I'm going to call on Heidi and Amanda. I'll write that down so I don't forget. And you all will have a couple moments at the end to reflect back what you witnessed, our group dynamic and experience. And so the final piece of the opening we wanted to do is just ask you to take a moment and think about your first cogen experience. What was it like to try this out? What was it like to enter this way of being with students? Was there anything surprising or challenging for you? And I'm going to ask that everybody do one of 2 things. Either put something in the chat or unmute and share with your voice a reflection you have on the process.
I can share.
Great.
My kiddos in my cogen are usually quite quiet, smart kids on the margin, and they were so enthusiastic throughout the entire process. And one of my questions or challenges in that, coming out of that, is like, of course, it wasn't as beautiful as the cogen you shared with us. And I felt like I didn't want to put too many parameters on the enthusiasm and like crush it. So it was a little bit disorganized. We came to some great conclusions, but like how to keep control of it, or if I should keep control of it.
Thank you for that, Sarah. I love how you kind of caught yourself and reframed how to keep control into should I keep control? I'm not sure. It's a really great reflective question. So thanks for starting us there. Love to hear from, okay, so Jessica has shared, my trial run was more successful than my actual filmed version. The kids were nervous, but they were also brutally honest. Powerful. Yeah, the filming can be kind of stilting, huh, for kids. I think it can feel like a lot of pressure. Thanks for noting that. Let's, can we hear from one or two other people to unmute?
Yeah, for me, it was exciting. The students were very excited to be a part of this group and this discussion, but also it was challenging. We were in a different room because my students were in class, so they were just getting distracted with everything. So the circle kept getting broken. I had students like getting up, getting water. Yeah, so I didn't feel like a closed like circle. Yeah.
Lindy says it was awkward to start, but the food was an icebreaker. I think there was some relationship building that made everybody more comfortable, and I feel like there was some relationship building that happened by the end of the meeting. Nice. Nice, nice, nice. Food is definitely can be an enabler of good relational dynamics for sure. Right, I'm going to turn it to Dr. J to take us into kind of the what we call the imaginal part of the agenda, just to help you through a couple of artifacts get a little bit more of an image of what this can make possible or yield, or what it looks like to have impact from doing this process. And I'll just note Jessica's last comment, it was so tricky not to get defensive. That was the hardest part. I'm bummed the video didn't work because I actually talked about that a little bit in the video, but now you have access to it with the new link, and it's a really important thing to notice. Yeah. Dr. J?
Great. Before I start, just 3 things I want to highlight. First of all, we were all up in your flip grids, and it was just so amazing to watch you all reflecting live. Oh my gosh, it was so great. We watched all of them, every little detail, sometimes like more than once, to like really be in there with you. So I just want to name, we are like literally on a process together. Just like we're asking you to dig into street data, we are then digging into your street data to try to make real-time decisions about what we prioritize. And that's energizing for us as well. So just know that everything that you all are putting out there, we are digging into, and really appreciate you all making the commitment that you have. The second thing is, which is a tip we forgot to say, always bring food, always bring food. Bring a treat or some water or something like that. That always helps the kids. And so I just encourage you when you go to your next cogen to bring something. I'm a fan of bringing sparkling water, you know, because it feels special, but it's still water. And I like to bring little bags of smart popcorn, you know, that's what I like, but I really encourage you to bring the food. And then the last thing I just wanted to mention, I thought about Dr. Chris Emden with this question around it feeling messy. That's really the spirit of a cipher. Like a cipher is not like that. A cipher is energizing. It's moving around. It's trying to, you know, be with the people that you're with, and then adding a little bit of structure to it, which you will see in this artifact. So what we're really hoping to do today is to continue to help you refine the process. You all are going to continue to do cogens over the next few weeks as you're working with your kids. But we now, having seen some of your videos and hearing even the reflections you're having now, you're probably like, I did this and it was helpful. And I feel like I didn't all the way get to where I wanted to go with it. And so this is really a session to try to help you with that a little bit more. So I want to share a couple of tips that we have for you all just at a high level. I'm going to share with you an artifact, and then we're going to share one more tip and kind of give you some time to work through your cogen to make it a little bit better. Okay, so if you go down in the agenda, you will see a piece that says Imaginal, the impact of a cogen. And the first thing I want to remind you of is this tip to refocus on your collective equity challenge. So as here's what I noticed. When I saw your flip grids, a lot of you got to a real clear practice you are struggling with. I heard someone struggling with conferring with kids. I heard someone struggling with sharing power in the lesson. I heard someone talking about their circle up process. and how they kind of manage the question and who's holding the space. I heard really specific questions you had around your practice. That's why we had you do that flip grid, to get really clear on where am I struggling. I also noticed, and Shane and I both did, that your equity challenge that you originally had was tightly related to that instructional focus. So for example, when I looked at Anna's video, she was talking about student engagement, which was related to the original equity challenge. How do they ensure that their students at the margins are engaged? She then started talking about a practice she's having a hard time with in the domain of engagement. But when I hear or saw some of the coaches, I was like, well, what happened to that? Your original equity challenge for my Canadian friends, I was really thinking about the Indigenous students you had talked about and the challenges you were experiencing on that original Jamboard. And I was thinking about student engagement for our folks here in California around student engagement with the cogen lens. So that's one tip I really want you to be thinking about. And I'm going to again show you an example of that original equity challenge. How is our conversation related to that? Because that's how we get practical. It's really different to ask kids maybe about culture versus, so let's talk about this conferring we do. You know what I mean? Like, I've heard you all say all these things. Let's bring that to conferencing. What could that mean with all the high level discussion we're having? The second is that as you're with kids, this is like a dance. It's not perfect, but you want to try to help them help you press to more specifics over time and help you get to an instructional shift. So you are not, the power of the cogen is you're not coming in with here's what we're going to do, but you are holding an area that you're thinking about, i.e. student engagement, right? You do have that in your mind. And so as kids are brainstorming with you, as they are like kind of chatting and talking, it might emerge, oh, this is a place of instruction I've been thinking about, right? You want to make sure in that cogen, it's kind of helping you get to instruction. There's like ways you can interact with kids to help you get to that. But those are the first two tips I just want to give you all. Hold to that equity challenge. That will already help with a lot of coherence and focus. And second, I know y'all all are obsessed about pedagogy, so let's have that in our minds as well. So what I want to do now is show you an example of a cogen I did with a couple of kids November. And this is at a middle school here in San Francisco. And this group of kids was brought together as a result of an equity challenge that the leadership team was working on. And over the last 2 years, they've been trying to figure out how do we, A, increase student voice of Black students in their school at large, but two, what does it mean for Black students, like what does engagement mean to them? And what does it mean for them to have a great experience in the classroom? So given the tips I just said to you, my real job with them was to help them get to a place of concreteness while also being in the cipher. So what I want you all to do is you're going to hear this clip and I'm going to ask you to kind of, in the spirit of the tips, what stood out to you, but also to tune in with design principles in mind to how it feels. How does it feel in this space? Okay, is that enough framing, Shane? Is there anything I forgot?
That was great. I have it up if you want me to show it, but I don't know where you wanted to start. So you can
okay, so I'll go ahead and shift it to my screen.
Perfect.
Because I have it teed up and you are going to hear me do a pause. Oh, which just by the way, if the kids get unfocused, you just maintain your composure because in this video, which you will not see, a literal emergency happened with another Black student while we were in the session. That was so distracting and we had to kind of roll with it. So I just want to affirm for you, if that happens, things happen. All right. I'm going to share one part, skip, and then share some more. So you were saying advisory is one of the issues, and right now you just focus on homework.
Because when we don't have homework, it's just really boring. Because mostly if we do get to use board games, it's only on Fridays. Mostly anything fun is on Friday. Yeah. So it's hard to. It's hard to just do something when it's and it's just more group
Is that right? I put how do we make it less boring? Okay.
Nice.
Okay. Why don't we just stick with that one? Why don't we stick with advisory? How do we get beyond homework and how do we make it less boring?
I just can say something too in our advisory class. So like we for the first part of advisory.
We do to, and this is where you, Mr. Chua and Ms. Dunbar and I can jump into. How would we make advisory less boring, and how would we do? What would we do beside homework?
Yeah, that's the question.
Yeah, that's my question.
Yeah. Oh, you wanted to answer it?
Yeah.
Well, like I was saying, during advisory, maybe like on every other Friday or some type of Friday, we can have like something like how we did, some type of some type of thing where either. Well, yeah. I'm so sorry. Iris, get them snacks, man. Stop playing with her. She's not to be played with. She went down. I'm so sorry. So yeah. Damien, like, yes, I agree on Friday, but like, what about every other day? That's a good question. That was a good one, Trey. I see you. Maybe with like some type of game thing, like maybe like during advisory. After you finish some type of homework, maybe you can do like some type of game, like every day. You know, maybe have those board games or something during class, maybe. Yeah, I feel like there should be at least some board games. Or you know, yeah, cause we know you can't do every Friday like the stuff, you know, or every day where during the Friday we have some type of. But or we like let us go outside for a little bit maybe during the advisory. Like if our teacher could take us outside, like let us do some activity. Yeah, kickball, like during an advisory, like one of your advisories. Yeah, like you guys could like one advisory versus the other advisory. Kickball, like you guys could like that. Yeah, that's actually a good idea. That's kind of better than auditorium every Friday because we do that Friday, maybe every other Friday something. But then we could do like some type of after you're done, you can go do some kickball or do some type of basketball just with your teacher. Or if another advisor want to come out, we can play against them and some kickball. That actually be a cool idea. That's actually good, guys. Right, basketball with your teacher. Maybe take our ideas and maybe we can actually do it. I'm telling you, better right, man.
So I'm going to stop there. And what I want to show you all really briefly before you chat is in the agenda, you should see the actual finished product brainstorm from this particular piece. They brainstormed what an entire math block could look like. It's like super specific. And this is their brainstorm around advisory. And what my real job there was to try to stay in pocket while also keeping all the different ideas. So you see that they came up with the question you heard, how do we move beyond the homework and how do we make it less boring? And what I did then was chart out the things that they wanted to have so that the leaders could then take this and try to actualize this as much as possible. So with this being shared, we would love to either have you come off of mute or just chat. What stood out to you in this example and how did the space feel listening in?
I really felt like I heard the children within them and their desire to play and be joyful and find the balance between work and being children.
I felt like it felt casual and authentic, like you were just kind of in on a conversation with kiddos.
The kids seemed to interact really well with one another. They were incredibly kind. They were very supportive and encouraging.
I think it's a good example of how kids can do have these visions. Like I think as adults, we can undermine or forget or not give kids enough credit. And this is just such a great counter example of yes, the kids have solutions, they have ideas. We just need to provide that space so that and really listen open-heartedly.
I just said I wanted to be there. It was so enthusiastic and energetic, just fun.
Did any questions come up for anyone thinking about your own experience before I move us?
I was curious as to what the original structure of advisory was or what the vision was, because we're actually moving towards something similar at BVHM where we're going to do daily advisory. And one of the questions we're holding is like, what is this space for? So I'm curious to see when your city was making their schedule, what their vision was for this time with students.
Thank you for saying that, Anna, because this is how we ended up in the cogen, is that they have a vision which I'd be happy to share, but it wasn't coming to life. It was becoming a place for homework for kids. And the original vision was around community building and really kind of identity development as a group of people, and really a place for relationship. It was kind of a part of their theory of change for increasing belonging. But what we were hearing from kids is that it was really whack. So the kids we didn't come and say, like, what are we going to do about advisory? We were just like, okay, we're thinking about advisory. We're thinking about block schedule. We're thinking about periods. What do you all think? And they were like, advisory. And instead of us saying like, okay, so here's what we're trying to figure out, we were like, what do you think we should be thinking about with advisory? And you heard them say it was boring. So it became the question of how do we make it less boring? So the vision wasn't matching what kids were actually experiencing in the classroom. Any other thoughts, reflections, or questions? Yes, Lindy, yes, that's good. That's good. Where are you, Lindy? Okay, I can see your face. Good. I'm glad to hear that. What would you come up with you and share just what made you feel that way?
When I was listening to the kids, it felt a little chaotic and not controlled. And I was like, okay, this is what it's supposed to be. Which, as I said in my flip grid, I struggle with that. I struggle with letting go and realizing that they are learning, even though it's a little more chaotic than I'm comfortable with.
Thank you, Lindy, because I was sweating, okay? Same thing for me. I was like, oh my gosh, I need to get my thing on the paper, but I think, again, I just want to affirm that feeling. That's a normal feeling for us all to have, and that's why I have my chart paper, so I can make sure we go and get the brainstorm on the page. It's important for us to do that. Those are both important. Thank you, Lindy. Just Anna, it felt very truthful, powerful, and student-centered. And Sarah said the space was so enthusiastic and energetic. I wanted to be there. Shane said holism, the importance of moving and being outside. The kids do have the answers. They had hecka answers. And the last thing I'll say before I move on is when we were in math period, when I said, they were giving me all these like answers we already heard before, let's do a do now and all this. When I said, stop, break it down to how you would want it to be minute by minute, the kids have ideas. So I just want to invite you again with the open heart and belief that if we give them the opportunity to think about these essential questions you all have, like what it means to feel like I belong in this classroom, right? Or what it means for me to be engaged in this classroom, they do have answers for us. And so that's it for now. Shane, I'm going to turn it over to you to take us a layer deeper.
That's beautiful. Are we going to skip the flip grid for now?
Yes, probably I think we'll skip the flip grid.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So Amanda, we were going to put you on the spot and show your flip grid, because we really noticed and appreciated how you were pressing toward like conferring, one-on-one conferring with students as a practice that I think I heard you say you really value, but it's also hard because you have like a classroom without desks and kids are moving a lot, and like how to find that kind of space. And then also it felt like this great place to model the idea of like them bringing that back down to the equity challenge. So like, what does that mean for Indigenous students, for how Indigenous students show up at school, their ways of being that are like culturally congruent, and kind of connecting those dots. So in this next piece, what we really want to do is kind of get practical for a minute. Hold on, let me switch screens. Give me one sec. And just prepare you for going back into this whole structure. So you'll see in the agenda that there's a make a copy link to create your own Foursquare feedback tool. I don't know why it says feedback. That's wrong, because I made this yesterday and I should have edited it. Foursquare reflection tool. And the idea here is we're trying to give you a structure for tip 3, which is how do you strive for coherence in this process, right? And by coherence, what we mean is your cogen is going to have its own flavor, and you might have your own individual kind of practice you're working on or way of being you're working on, but that each and every one of you on this team, it's still connected to the larger inquiry question that your team is wrestling with, right? So you're rooting again in the equity challenge that you identified when you came to this project. And then you're also rooting back in those design principles, those ways of being. This is how we want to be with kids, in order to go back to the cogen and think about what's that instructional shift, what's that really concrete kind of specific area of practice that I want to work on. So in the tool, you'll see that there's a space to write about, just to kind of return to the Anchoring Equity Center Challenge, and it's hyperlinked to the Jamboard that I put in the chat a little bit earlier. So that's a place where you all did some beautiful thinking early on, right? We went back to that and we were like, this is amazing. Like, you took the equity challenge that you had written in the RFP, which made us choose you all out of all the teams that were applying. And then you kind of unpacked it. What are our questions about this, right? What does it mean to belong for Indigenous students? What does engagement really mean for some of our most marginalized learners? And so you're going to come back to that, and then you're going to come back to those design principles we created, I think, the last meeting, right? And think about, is there one of these design principles that I really want to center as I go back to the cogen? And then at the bottom, this is the part you'll be taking into a helping trio a little bit later today to really get some thought partnership on whatever dilemmas are coming up for you around this process, right? So is there an emerging kind of instructional practice or way of being in the classroom related to that school-wide challenge that is kind of coming out already in your cogen? And if the answer is no, I need to go back and I need to talk to kids more about instructional design, instructional practice. That's okay. That's okay. You don't have to like fake it. Just whatever's true for you. But maybe you're on the cusp of kind of something feels like it was a seed in that conversation. You can pull it out here. And then lastly, when we think about how do we know that this is making a difference, Chris Emden, the first time I heard him talk about this practice, I don't even think his book had come out yet. And he talked about his first cogen and how the students told him, like, sometimes you get so animated and you're so loud in class that some of us are just like freak out. We can't handle it. It's like too much. And so he basically made them his assessment team in class, and they created this tapping signal so that if he started to elevate and the kids were like, it's too much, they would just tap on their desks. And that would be his signal to like take a breath, kind of slow himself down. So that was his example. So the idea here is that the cogen students aren't just giving you ideas of things to work on, they're actually becoming like your assessment pod in class. So they're helping you track how things are progressing around whatever it is. So maybe you're trying to figure out, how do we get some of the quieter students in class to participate? And they're helping you pay attention to that, right? Maybe you're trying to, really play with some more Indigenous centered ways of being with how you open class. What are the opening rituals for class, and how could I actually honor principles of Indigenous education and how I open class? And then the students are helping you track, what's the impact of that? Does it feel different? Do people loosen up? Are new people coming into the conversation? These are the kinds of things they can help you pay attention to. And at the very bottom, just an emerging dilemma. This is where I'm feeling a little bit stuck, or I need some thought partnership, okay? What we thought we would do is break into the two schools for about 10 minutes, just to allow you to kind of get some coaching and support from us before you then kind of quietly go into your own tool and do some sketching of where you want to go next.
All right. Hello, everyone. It's so nice to see you. It's been a little while, but I actually see you all the time through your videos. It's kind of funny. It's like I was just talking to you, Anna H. We were just in conversation about your classroom. So I'm so proud of you all, just first of all, with all the work that you all are doing. The question here is, if, this is really an opportunity for you to think about the tips we're sharing, kind of where you are, and see if you need a little bit of coaching on any of this. Before we give you time to go into quiet reflection around thinking about your instructional focus and how kids can help you figure out if progress is being made. So this time is for you.
Okay. Yeah, I think I need some coaching. So when I brought the students together, I'm like, okay, we're going to think about a dilemma in the classroom, and they just started throwing out ideas. And I think I kind of didn't push them towards the engagement part. I just let them throw out ideas. So it's like los estudiantes pican, like students poke each other with pencils, students talk to others and distract them. The teacher cares too much. She gets worried too much. She gets worried. Se preocupa demasiado. She worries too much. And also when the teacher gets upset, when she gets mad. Cuando se enoja, when students bring toys to school. So then I was thinking to like shift it. It's like, okay, so a problem is students distract each other. So what could we change in the work that we do in class in order for students to feel more engaged in the assignment?
All right, group, what do you all think? I just on my piece in terms of helping, that was the one I went to. That was closest to student engagement, the distraction piece. And I like how you're thinking about the framing of it. Team, what do you all think, either in general or how that could be framed? What do you all think? And I'm gonna pull up your equity challenges to see if that spurs any ideas for us as well. Can you all see my screen? So this is just a reminder of some of the questions you all were asking related to this area of engagement.
May I add on to what Anna said?
You sure can.
Okay, because that came up with my students too, Anna, and they said that they actually liked being separated from their friends because they had a hard time concentrating. And so what came out of that, the questions that I was then throwing back at them was, well, what could make you able to be more ready to learn so that you could work with your friends? Like, how can we get you to compartmentalize the socializing and the academic work? So I just thought it was interesting that it was sort of the same thing. My friends distract me. I don't want to work with them. We talked some about the break time that's being built into our schedule next year, the middle school 10 minutes between classes. And I'm sitting here also reflecting on, one of you said, how do you, like, Jessica's, I was listening to the flip grids and she said she takes the temperature of the room before beginning and maybe adapting the lesson. And how do I create the class? How do I get them ready when they come in? Because I just expect them to come in ready.
So in the spirit of coaching, I'm gonna be a little bit directive and have us use Anna's example for a second, right? So Anna is, tell me if I'm hearing you wrong. I'm hearing, so I had my cogen, kids came up with a whole bunch of ideas. It was hard for me to figure out how to push them towards student engagement, right? And so what do I do about that is what I hear you saying. And so I'm gonna tie this back to the tips. A, you're right, we're not moving away from student engagement. That's the first thing. The second thing is, how do we then bring in your design principles though, as you think about working with kids around this issue? So this is not to say we're gonna say, no, forget about what you said, we're gonna move to student engagement. What were the things that they were saying that can help us think about student engagement, right? I'm just going through a thought process. Well, what you pulled out, Anna, was the fact that kids were talking about being distracted, right? So you started to reframe their question a little bit. And so what I want the team to help us with is how can we reframe this question around distraction to help us think about engagement? Because that's what I get to bring back to the kids, right? So the kids that I was talking, we're saying a whole bunch of things, but I could hear a spirit in what they were saying. They kept talking about boredom. So while I might originally as a grown-up say like, how do we make advisory more engaging? That doesn't resonate with them. They kept talking about boredom. So I had to then reframe the question and say, well, let's brainstorm ways the class is less boring, right? So when I heard you start to go in the like, well, what could we do, so that we want to engage? But team, if we could take a second just to think about what's a question, and Anna, if you would do me a favor and just read that thing out again, that kid said, if we could think for a second about a kind of reframing question that kids could help us brainstorm around, given that would be really great. What'd they say, Anna?
They said students talk and distract others.
Great. And then you were starting to think about reframing it like how? What did you say?
What kind of work do we, what do we need to not distract others? What kind of work could we do in the classroom?
Okay, so now you heard where she's at right now. Let's help her out a little bit with that. How could we phrase that question? I'm gonna take something off the table. We can't say what we're not gonna do. It has to be in the affirmative. So we're thinking about what we can do. It creates more spaciousness and it's more abundant. With that being said, I'm gonna give everybody like 30 seconds, not perfect. Just think about a question we might shift this to. All right, let's just see what we came up with. Anna, you take notes with what folks say. All right, what did we come up with?
I'm thinking like, what does class work look like, sound like, feel like?
When ... on a S.
Yeah, like when we're working, I guess I'm curious to know like when they're being distracted. I'm imagining it's during independent work time. Are they supposed to be working with a partner? So it could be like during independent work time or during partnerships, or I don't know, like depending on the context of the lesson.
When did they say they're getting distracted? Was
They
it all
specify? They didn't specify.
Great. Okay, so that's one question. What it might look like, sound like, and feel like.
I was thinking like what could change in our classroom so we all treat each other with respect? Or, I don't know, that seems a little more adult focused, but I'm very used to writing adult agendas. But yeah, what can we change in the classroom so we all feel safe to learn?
Let me get one more, and then I'll add a little bit of coaching in there.
How could you keep working when there is a distraction?
Okay. Thank you all for sharing, and I'm going to push all of you with all the love in the world. We are so adults. we are adulting, right? So safe to learn, respect, right? Distraction. Those words aren't fun to kids, and they're not the things that speak to children, right? So we gotta bring it down a lot for them to meet us, for us to meet them where they are. Anna, what grade are your babies? 2nd grade. Okay, and you know Araceli got kindergartners, so we can't come in here talking about how we're gonna be respectful and all of that, right? This is no harm, no foul. This is just me trying to get there faster. So this is not the right question. I want to see if you can pull out some things from the question I just wrote. I wrote, how do we make our math lessons? I just made it math. Mm-hmm. How do we make our math lessons a time where how do we make our math lessons something everyone wants to do and can do? Mm-hmm. What do you notice in that kind of question? Not that it has to be that one, but what do you notice in that kind of question?
You're focusing on what you want them to do rather than the problem or the distractions, rather than
yeah. Sorry, Lindy, go ahead.
I'm finished. Thank you.
Yeah. Still getting at distraction, right? But we're trying to have them help us brainstorm on the things that we can do and change in the classroom. So yes, that would be one thing. And then the second thing I would just say, because I want to give you all time to work on this on your own, I just tried to make it specific to an area for me as a teacher, like math or like centers or like carpet time or like something that I know for me, I can work on with the kids so that I'm staying in the instructional lane. Mm-hmm. So those are the two things I was trying to pull on. Help me get to instruction, guys. Not to you all, they don't know how to do that, but if we kind of hear what they say, reframe, hear what they say and reframe so we can brainstorm together and create openings, we're more likely to get them to be authentic, A, because they're babies, and B, well, young people, we can get them to be more authentic, and B, we can get to more concrete stuff. So with you all having heard that in mind, I want to give you all 5 minutes to go back to your stuff. I have the equity challenges, original ones here. Think about your design principles. And in the conversations you've had so far with kids, what might be emerging as an instructional area you could focus on? If it's not, just what do you need to go back to do in your cogen? And how could the kids help you get to indicators of progress? What are some of the things you might need to do in the cogen to get there? Does that sound okay? And then you'll get more kind of paired coaching after this. I'm gonna say you can go off camera if you would like to, but this is your quiet time to do some reflecting on the 4-square. Do you all have the 4-square? Okay, perfect. I'll leave my screen up and then in 5 minutes we'll transition.
Our group is focusing our equity challenges around Indigenous students. And so when we pulled our cogen groups, they were mainly Indigenous students. And so we were struggling with like maybe tokenism or not sharing with them exactly why we chose them specifically. Like, of course, we want to hear their ideas and make our school a better place for them, but none of us outrightly mentioned the Indigenous factor. And so Shane just helped us reframe it, that instead of approaching it from a deficit lens, we could approach it from an asset lens, and the abundance of the wealth of knowledge that they bring and their culture can bring. So it gave us a lot to think about moving into our next meetings.
Thank you, Sarah. And you know what I just realized, which is always a hard thing to manage. I just want to name, actually, this is something important to name. I'm going to venture to say, which I could be wrong, that some of my non-racialized folks are really trying to monitor like when you speak or not, which is why you might be waiting, right? So I invite our folks who are racialized to speak if you would like to, but at the same time, if you have an idea, please speak. So I'm wondering if that's what's making you all take some time to share. So I just want to name that. I know we're trying to dance in that balance. But I surely, if we've had a few seconds and no one has responded, please just jump out there. Thank you so much, Sarah, for sharing. I appreciate you going out on a limb and sharing what your group talked about. We are going to move to these groups. Shane, how can I get my own link while I'm in a Zoom? How do I don't know how to do that.
You would have to sign on in the web, like go to Zoom.
Okay.
Whatever,
and then
extract it. Yeah. We're going to move in just a second, but I do want to ask, in the spirit of embracing vulnerability together, like how that push felt for our Canadian colleagues to think about more explicitly talking to the students about their Indigenous identity and why you're choosing to ask them questions, and how does it sit with you?
Funny enough, Shane, that was a similar thing we talked about in the other group. You guys tell me if I'm wrong, but I feel like we talked about that.
Yeah. How do you talk to kids about, what does it mean to be at the margins? How do you not frame the invitation?
The piece around, not specifically to be at the margins, but the piece around our language when we're making our questions, how do we put it in the abundance frame and not the deficit frame? It's hard to do.
It's super hard. And the other piece I'll just say briefly that came up is, what do you do when kids are carrying their own kind of like internalized shame and racism into the space, and how to navigate that? And so we were just talking about how that's really complex, and that's part of, I think, the wrestling that is happening in this learning journey, right? Is like to get more fortified and more skillful about how to help kids navigate those painful kind of experiences. Okay, Jessica, I know with some kids it's going to be powerful, but with another it might be triggering. The abundance and deficit framework is going to be very helpful. Beautiful. Okay, so I have us set up into 3 breakout rooms. Now that I think about it again, probably one of the rooms should stay here. I keep forgetting the recording part. It's so complicated. Okay, so if you're in room 3, just reject, don't join. Stay here with me if you're in room 3, okay? And rooms 1 and 2. So each room has 2 teachers, one from BC, one from California. So you'll get to hear across teams. The protocol is really simple. It's a 10-minute round. So you'll have about 3 minutes to share your reflections from the bottom half of the sheet. So really well, you can share anything you want, but we were thinking maybe focusing a little bit on here's the instructional practice I'm kind of thinking about and some possible indicators or ways to engage students around that. Most importantly, a dilemma, right? A dilemma that you're facing right now as you think about the next phase of this. After those 3 minutes, the people that are in the room with you, which will be 3 other folks, are going to just have a conversation and you'll just listen. You just get to be the listener and take notes on whatever is said. And our job as those who are talking is to just kind of offer questions, I wonder statements, maybe another way of seeing this might be, or here's a pathway the person might explore. And then at the end, the presenter will have a couple minutes to synthesize what you're taking away and what you might try next. Okay, it's like a little 10-minute consultancy round. Anna and Jessica, would one of you like to go first?
Okay. The Foursquare was really helpful to get me back to thinking about our equity-centered challenge. So I just jotted down to remind me, it's like, when do students feel engaged at school? How would they describe engagement? As kind of like my center question, and also what design principle is shaping my approach to the cogen would be, don't be afraid for it to get messy, allow things to get messy, be vulnerable. So I'm trying to keep those things in mind. And I know that with Jamila, I spoke about how I was having a hard time based on what the students shared to then bring it back to equity. But with the help of my team and Jamila, I was able to revise my question for the students Jamila had a good suggestion. How do we make and I'm not sure, I'm going to ask students what area of the class, what subject they think we need to improve more on. Is it math, writing, reading? So how do we make our writing lessons something everyone wants to do, or something everyone enjoys doing, which is still like related to them being distracted by others? It's like, okay, if you enjoy doing it, you're not getting up and distracting your friend, or you're not like poking your classmate. But then with the other questions, what is a concrete instructional practice? I don't know. I guess I'm having a hard time with that question. Could you give me some examples?
So you're thinking about how to make writing lessons more enjoyable.
Yes.
What are your main writing structures right now that you use?
Mini lessons. So a lot of mini lessons. So 10 minutes on the rug, and then, okay, you go off and try it on your own. And then you might you share with a partner afterwards, or I share out examples at the end of the class. But it's pretty independent.
Yeah. And is there a place in that arc that you kind of feel like you want to focus in on for the cogen?
I think students are referring to like the work time, like when they're at their desk working.
Okay, so how to make that more enjoyable. So that seems like a great place to focus, that like a very specific place to focus the cogen on, and even ask the students that, like, what are some things that give you joy and flow when you're doing a task? Is it music? Is it smart popcorn, like Jamila said? Is it getting up and like, moving every few minutes? Is it I mean, I have my own like writing routines, but almost like having them help you picture what would infuse like a little more joy and flow into what can be really hard.
Yeah.
You feel like this is a good place for you to just kind of be receptive and for the 4 of us to talk about what you shared? Yeah. Do you want to say anything else about your dilemma as you see it?
No.
Okay. All right. We're going to take 4 minutes and just open conversation, the 4 of us, about what Anna's put forward.
I don't know. I'm just lucky that I get to be around Anna's classroom. I don't get to go in as often as I'd like to, but I mean, from an outside perspective, it does seem like a very joyous place to be. And so I'm trying to figure out how to find the way to ask kids, like, how can it even be better? You know, because yeah, it's, but I'm trying to think of this idea of being messy and being vulnerable, Anna. I know that like your classroom hums in this really exciting way. And so like, how do you want that to change too? I mean, maybe it's also, how are you able to like, let things go too? I don't know, that's where I'm starting with this.
Jessica, you want to jump in?
I guess maybe my one and only comment or thought is around, I'm just noticing a pretty distinct difference between, you know, the age range that I interact with, and then of course the age range that Anna interacts with. So it's like, where is kind of that bridge where I can learn from those younger grades, and then maybe the connection with the, you know, mature 13, 14-year-olds I get to interact with on a daily basis, and just the differences there, because in all honesty, I'm incredibly overwhelmed by a situation that happened at school today, and through the co-gen process, actually. So it's almost like I need a little mini therapy session as to unpacking what went down in my space and across the school since. So sorry, I am not an articulate individual today.
Thanks.
Or now I'm not present in any means. So I'm so sorry, Anna. No good.
You're doing great, and thanks for showing up still despite this, and then just bringing it to us with honesty. I'm also happy to stay on after 5 if you want to chat for a few minutes.
Yeah, just maybe even just a little unpacking to kind of help me work through some of the steps and knowing where maybe I can do better. So I love the joyousness of the elementary kind of mindset and everything. And I think I need to take on more of that and less control and appreciate some messiness, because that's definitely what happened.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think, yeah, I don't feel like I have any like brilliant feedback for Anna, but I'm thinking about how hard writing is. Like, I just wrote an op-ed that my editor of Street Data asked me to write, and I was like, oh, it's so hard. And I'm thinking about what functions as reward for different students, right? Like, part of how I get through hard things is I have a reward at the end. So for me, the reward was that my editor really liked what I wrote, and I felt so good. Like, it made it totally worth it, and it helped me get through. But for other students, that might not be it. You know, like, positive praise is a good thing for some people, but not others. And so I wonder about also asking them, acknowledging that it's hard. Writing is really hard at every age. It makes your brain work overtime. And then wondering, like, what are the things that make you feel rewarded when you do a hard thing? I wonder what they would have to say about that. We're at 3 seconds. All right, we're going to turn it back to you, Anna, for the last couple minutes of reflection. If there's anything you're taking away or any directions that you see yourself going in with this next phase of the cogen.
I think these were all like great suggestions. I just, like, one thing that I'm noticing, it's like, oh, there's like a lot of like good questions. Like, when do you start to feel that you need a distraction? Like, what's going on in your head? Like, what are things that make you feel successful? Like, I'm just wondering when will be a good time to ask those, if it should be more like an empathy interview, like one-on-one, or if those questions should also be related to my cogen. Like, yeah, I guess it would be related in thinking of the plan, right? Like, what are our action steps? And I would use those questions to help them guide the actions that we need to take. I guess that's where I'm going.
And I'm stepping out of the protocol, but I just love what you said. It's like an infinity loop, right? So
Mhm.
the way I try to describe the equity transformation cycle is like non-linear. So we get somewhere and then we have to go backwards. And so what
Mhm.
I hear you saying is some of these questions feel more appropriate for an empathy interview versus a cogen kind of structure.
Mhm.
And I think you're right. You can do that. And then you can come back to the cogen and maybe synthesize some of what I heard. Let's figure out what we're going to try differently with the writing time. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I really love how you're thinking about that. Any final thoughts? All right, let's give some love to Anna. Yay. I wasn't even thinking clearly, Jessica, that we can also just use this time now for what's on top for you. It's like, wait a minute, we have a whole protocol here. Yeah, I think you should speak to whatever you're struggling with, if that feels appropriate for you.
We're really digging into kids and their sense of belonging and safety within our space and within the school. And it's almost like as we're doing more work, it's coming more and more to a head. So, the big equity center challenge is, safe, warm, and welcoming space, but then also still holding the kiddos accountable for some of their behaviors and actions. And so in empowering them to use their voices and share some things out, we ended up having some incredibly racist comments made. We've really been working through with the kids and the whole concept of fighting and how that's affecting the safety in the space. It's a very, sadly, it's the marginalized against the Caucasian kids at the moment. And it's getting really, really tricky. And I had one of my kiddos curse in the middle of one of our circle discussions because a child was, and not, in unpacking with the kid definitely was coming from a place of, ignorance, it seemed, but we couldn't negate the fact of what the one child was feeling in the space. And it was very much, it appeared to be racially motivated, and it just caused a lot of tension. And then that situation has now transpired into today. We did kind of some trial work with the whole class, and then it was around some of the fighting that's happening at the school. And then that actually ended up within 10 minutes, said child getting in a fight at school around some pretty devastating comments about a marginalized kiddo. So in working through the space, the circle conversation in a very in an intentional way, it ended up moving into something I didn't expect. And so, if we're looking at, equity and equality, it became very apparent in some of these diggings with other children. So I guess I should say, I've done some with my kids at the margin and some with my kids not, just in a whole class conversation, just to kind of, and in all honesty, just, I don't know, playing with things and experimenting and seeing what could be teased out of it. And it took me aback how deep rooted some of the equity challenges and racial biases that are still being perpetuated amongst children within, the space. So when it comes to something I'm very concerned about is, wanting to empower them to know their voice matters. We care about it. They're sharing some stuff that I don't know how to navigate necessarily yet. So sorry, I don't know if this aligns with the top two. I'm kind of looking at what I have, but then kind of.
This is the work.
Yeah, there you go. There's
no box that sums up the work, right? The tool's just the tool. Thank you for being vulnerable with us. I think rather than like do a consultancy, maybe each of us could just share like an affirmation and a reflective question if we have one. You want to start, Erin? You're upper left for me.
I guess I'm just thinking that in a lot of situations, things have to get worse to get better. And so I think that probably a lot of this, was all below the surface anyways, and probably kids were being harmed without you even knowing. And so the fact that now you have this lens on it, and I think it's just good that the adults are now more aware of the harm that's being done, and so that you can shift things to make your space a more inclusive space. So I think as much as you feel like maybe it was because of the cogen that this happened, it's probably just that things are coming to light that you all can now like help students move forward with.
Thank you. And that actually made me think of a question. Was I wrong to do, because I know the cogen is intended to be, because I've done kind of a couple mock trial ones to get comfortable with it, because I'm very awkward and uncomfortable when I know there's recording happening. So was I wrong in doing a whole class one that this created it? So yeah, was I wrong in doing that?
I'm going to steer clear of right or wrong.
Okay, please.
Yes, in a learning stance. I hear that it feels like it was a vulnerable choice, and it led to some places that were hard to predict and that feel messy and hard right now. Anna, do you want to share an affirmation and a wondering?
Know that Jessica, I really appreciate like your growth mindset and your empathy for these students, and saying like, yep, I don't know, I don't have a solution yet, but I know that with your school community and with all the work that you are doing, you will get to work on this to help all students feel welcome.
Yeah, I want to just appreciate your wholehearted approach to this. Like, it's very clear that your whole heart is in this work and in your classroom, and that you're carrying everything that happened today and yesterday with you. And, I think that's like the foundation of all of it, is being willing to allow yourself to be moved and touched and even hurt sometimes by, what the kids are bringing. I really appreciated what Erin said, like just holding that bigger lens for us of that's all there, right? Like the systemic racism is generational, it's under the surface. And a lot of times I think, I don't know if this is a question, I'll try to formulate it into a question. It's like, the white supremacy culture framework is like, we just don't talk about the things. We just keep moving and we're doing the things and there's urgency. And, if we just don't name it, if we just don't talk about it, it's all going to be fine. And I think that it's like this excruciating moment, right, to have stuff come out, but it's also, I think, allows for liberation and it allows for healing. So it's all in, as Erin said, like, how do you move from here? And how do you do that as a team where you don't feel alone, right? Because you're just holding a moment that's part of such a bigger story of the school and the community and the reserve that's across the street and all the things. So we're holding you, and I know your team will be too. And I don't think you did anything wrong. I think you're being really brave and trying out new practices. And that's, yeah, you look like you want to say something. Turn it back to you.
Yeah, it felt icky. So I'm still in the process of trying to like be comfortable with the ickiness, and then just, okay, what are the next steps to repair and like just the next steps to move kind of out of this ickiness into like a really positive space. And I think kind of as Erin had said, focusing on the good that can come from it. And so everything has been kind of simmering like a pot of boiling water, and now it's overflowing. And it definitely, we felt like it's gotten worse before it's gotten better. But I'm even noticing, kids at the margins that are, have themselves dealt with this. It's almost like they're lashing out towards others, and it's trying not to fall into that tokenism. Well, you're a kid at the margins yourself, and yet it almost seems like you're perpetuating the problem. And it's just, I don't know. I'm not being overly articulate right now, if I'm honest, sorry. I like the circle with the equality and the voices, and everyone's voice, gets to be heard, but the worry that comes out of some of what's shared. So, I guess maybe I need to go back to, emphasizing, productive conversation, comments that are going to move us forward. And maybe I just need to unpack a little more at the beginning to make sure that there's maybe a deeper understanding of what you're sharing and the impact it might have on others. So maybe that's where I need to kind of regroup and spend a little bit more time in that initial portion.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you all have a, since we're still waiting for them to come back, do you all have a resident elder in your school?
We do. Yes, we do. We have a few tied in. We had a great gentleman that was going to work on some carving with the kids. And then I think he got picked up by another school, so he wasn't able to connect with some of our kids, but we definitely do.
Okay. I wonder if it would be possible to sit down with one of the elders and just talk about this from the same kind of wholehearted place that you're talking to us. Like, this is really hurting me, and I don't know how I could have navigated it differently, but like, what are your thoughts about how to heal my class from here?
Yeah, I love that.
I'm going to imagine that Amanda and Lindy are two sharers today. Yes, you and Heidi and I are going to be support. So here's what's going to happen. One of you as teachers will present your reflections from your Foursquare. Then we will kind of discuss. You will be quiet for a second. We will discuss kind of what we hear you saying and offer some ideas. And then the presenter will synthesize and we'll talk about next steps. So who would like to go first?
I was frantically looking at my Foursquare because it feels really messy. It feels really incomplete and really messy.
Okay.
So now I'm opening it so I can look at it. The first, I'm just reading what I jotted down. Anchoring equity-centered challenge was student engagement after distance learning. Because when I was reading through the notes and on the Post-it page, that seemed like that came up over and over. Design principle of being that is shaping my approach is to step out, for me to step up, step back, step out and encourage students to run the meeting and encourage student problem identification. And then the questions that is in the left box that I've come up with for the next meeting on Monday, which Shane helped with yesterday. Why is academic conversation valuable? And what does a super inclusive classroom look like during academic conversation? Because at BVHM, I've got a wide range. I just got a student yesterday who just got here who speaks absolutely no English, all the way through, to the couple white kids who English was their first language. So wide range of language abilities, and that, with the willingness to speak and cultural things about not speaking and all that. And then the last one, how can your cogen students help you get to, that was what I put in the emergent dilemma. How can this group help facilitate academic conversation? And how can this group monitor progress? So that's really what I want to say. So now y'all can jump in and help me, please.
Perfect, with 10 seconds to spare. So team, what are you hearing? What are we hearing from Lindy? And what ideas do we have for her? I'm gonna put some time on the clock.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, let's go ahead and do that. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Lindy, one of the things you said was you're wanting to step out and kind of encourage student problem solving, engagement, and that. How do you feel about that? Does that make you excited? Does it make you nervous? How do you feel about that?
Well, I feel like it's a shortcoming, my control freak stuff, and that, and I am always embrace working on shortcomings, but I understand how difficult it is. I mean, I picked this. The kids aren't in there saying, "You're bossy, Ms. Martin, get out of the way." I mean, that's sort of. So yeah, I mean, I think it will help my teaching, and it will help my relationships with my kids. And if the relationships are good, then they will be more engaged in the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
Did I answer? Is that?
I guess I was asking because I wasn't sure how resistant or excited. I don't know what the opposite of resistant is, but how easily that comes for you, maybe.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Straight up. I mean, that's why I picked you. That's why I picked it.
It's commendable.
I think this work is hard, right? I mean, this work is hard, and I keep putting myself into this work because once you start doing it, you can't really stop, right? You just, we have this thing at BVHM. Once you're, stay woke, that's what we say. Stay woke. And,
So
I've always taught this population. No, it's okay, it's fine. I've always taught this population, and this class and another one that we're taking this year have really, really helped me grow, And I'm at that age where you see so many teachers like, okay, I'm in the last 5 years, I'm not learning anything new, I'm not changing, I'm not doing, and you have to, or it gets boring, right? But I have to be honest with the four of you. Bishop Michael Curry is about to give a lecture upstairs. I'm in the basement at Grace Cathedral on ending racism. So Amanda should speak because I got to go upstairs in like 5 minutes so I get a seat. I love this meeting, but this other thing is really important to me too. So I apologize.
That's okay. Let's just give you a recommendation. Each of us give you a recommendation before you go. Amanda, what just came up for you, and what recommendation do you have for Lindy as she gets to go to this next cogen on Monday?
Yeah, I recommend that you just stay woke, Lindy. I think you're on the right path, and I think you're doing all the right purposeful work. And your questions, the more that you conference with your colleagues, are going to start to naturally unfold as you continue moving forward in your inquiry.
Heidi.
I think I would just maybe encourage you to put the two things that I heard from you together. So wanting to step out and encourage your students to kind of use their voice and problem solve, and apply that to what does an inclusive classroom look like in classroom conversation. Ask them.
And that goes with my recommendation. I would just pay close attention to language of inclusive classroom, not because it's bad language, but to make sure they understand, right? So I like how when Heidi said, what does it mean for them to kind of feel like they can problem solve and use their voice? That might be how you're defining inclusion, right? So just to try to make sure whenever you pose the question, it's something that they can fully understand so that they can authentically engage with that question. And then second, Lindy, sometimes it's hard to get the kids to start talking, right? Or it's hard to kind of make sure they're make sure they're brainstorming and kind of staying in that space. I think it's okay for you to say things like, say more about that, or go further with that, break it down, like all those kinds of words that help kids just go more expansive. And that is your way of encouraging yet stepping out at the same time as they're doing this work. And I think if you take all these recommendations, I think you'll continue to be on the right track. I'm very proud of you.
Thank you. So sentence stems for me.
Like stems, yeah.
For me, that I, okay.
Thank you. Say more, go further, pretend like there's no rules, pretend like there's no rules and you've never been here before. All those kinds of, things. Or sometimes I do this with my kids. You have grandchildren that you talk a lot about, Lindy, yeah? I know this, hopefully this is not offensive to your big children in the class, but I think of them sometimes as small children when I'm thinking about my words, because they don't talk like we do. And you know how when you're talking to your grandchildren, you can kind of discern what they're saying, even though they're speaking in kid voice. I kind of put that hat on, and then it'll help me kind of go like, oh, I get the spirit of what they're saying. I get the spirit, and I can connect the spirit with their words.
I appreciate that, because my husband Spanish was his first language, and he always says, "You're talking like you swallowed a dictionary. You need to stop doing that with me." So thank you. I appreciate that very much.
Okay, Lindy, hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening. We're going to jump to help out Amanda.
I'm sorry, Amanda. Thank you so much.
All right. Bye, Lindy. Okay, Amanda, look, you have special help right here because we're zoned in, tuned into you. Okay.
Okay, well, please don't zone into the disappointment factor that I completely was unable to do a cogen in this last week. But I think that it also, in a sense, speaks volumes to some of my hangups of why I just felt like I couldn't get to it. One of the things was that the handful of students that I was leaning into, they are no longer in the building, period. They have been removed from the building, and I've really been having a hard time with all of that. And then it was hard not to just tokenize and pick a few extra students to replace that. So I felt like that was one of the hangups. And then I'm going to lean back into the conference time and like really being able to carve it out. And I felt like, well, I could cram it into a lunch time, or I could really find it here, but none of that felt like it was authentically true. And I think that as a non-enrolling teacher, or like somebody in the electives, or even PE teachers, if we truly want this to be a practice that all teachers are jumping on board with, I want to make sure that I understand how I can fit that in so that I could share that with other teachers who feel like their schedule is also crammed. Yeah, so when I said like what in the first square there, I really felt like for us at C&B, not only did I not get to it, but also that we really struggled to align our equity challenge with what questions would come up in the cogen. And it felt a little bit discombobulated, and we tried really hard to rush together as a group to come up with the main question we'd be asking our students, but we missed going back to the main equity challenge question. And when the coaching was so helpful today to go back and refine what that was for us, we've done so much purposeful work that I think we've just gotten a little bit lost in the spiral of inquiry. And yeah, so I don't have much else to add for that today, but if you have any suggestions on carving out the time in a classroom that is maybe not the same as where kids are reading or doing some group work, right? Mm-hmm. I would gladly take that in. Yeah. So that I could share that with peers. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so just clarify. First of all, I'm sorry that the transition of this group of kids happened. That's really, really difficult, especially if you are thinking about centering the margins, and then you're centering a group of students at the margin, and then they're not any there. And I can imagine there's probably something related to being on the margins that is a part of why they are not there.
Absolutely.
So I'm sorry that is something that is happening right now. And just want you to know it's okay that was something that happened and you just didn't get to it as a result of that. That's okay. You're a human being. And then the second question I have is just like, so you're mentioning because you're kind of a different kind of teacher, it feels hard. Help me understand that a little bit more. Is it like the space in the day? Is it like that it feels authentic to you in general? What is that challenge a little bit more?
Sure. In this space, it's quite dysregulated. I have a lot of students that either shine in this space because a part of themselves can come out in drama that they don't get to do in the classroom, but with our kids that are maybe designated or it's really so dysregulated, they kind of fly off the handle and there has to be all eyes on deck at all times, right? So I'm having a hard time carving out maybe a space where I could take a group of kids while the other madness is happening in behind me.
Got it. I'm interested. What do you think about having a co-generative dialogue with that group of kids that does have a harder time engaging in the drama class?
Yeah.
If I was a PE teacher, you know who I would choose? Which is totally coming from like middle school. It's like the girls who don't want to do gym, you know, like sometimes that group of kids, right? So I think we all in our spaces, you know, have kids who are having a hard time accessing that particular subject. So that might be a way to reorient. And if this, I know you all's question is around largely like the experience of Indigenous learners. Are any of your children who are designated students of Indigenous background?
There would be a few, absolutely, for sure. But I'm going to be quite honest. I see a lot of just students shine in the space, and that want to come and be in this space with me. And they'll tell Tina, our Indigenous advocate, I'm not going to any other electives. I'm just going to Mrs. Liebel. And yeah, so I was thinking how I could just, shine the light on, like, how could I make you feel more included in this space? But I really didn't feel like it was in this space where they suffer the most.
But that's great. That's another, no, this doesn't have to be like, let me make your experience bad. And,
yeah, for sure.
It could be about how you extend that. What is happening in this space that allows you to feel like you belong, right? And how could we make that, happen in other classrooms?
Okay.
Right? Like, it doesn't have to be deficit based. Heidi, go ahead.
I was just the very last thing you said, and I think one of my big takeaways that just keeps popping into every conversation we've had since today is the deficit versus asset lens. And that's exactly what I was going to say. So rather than just looking at what's going well in your classroom and say, and I think even be honest, like, I know that you're not, maybe engaged in all of your classes. I know that you really enjoy coming to drama. Yeah. What is it about this space that that makes you feel welcome here, or that makes you feel good in this space? How can we get some of those things and put that into some of your other experiences?
Yeah, 100%. Because imagine what happens if you bring that then to your team, right? Because now we have, some other places where kids aren't experiencing that, but we also have ideas for where they are experiencing that. And those things can really get married and then be powerful for the whole school. And then you can double tap on those when you're planning next year, right? Sometimes it's about going deeper and really expanding on what the kids are telling you.
Yeah. I like that.
Yeah, go ahead, Heidi, and then I'll let you synthesize.
Just in terms of finding the time, Amanda, and like how do we do that? I mean, that's the $1 million question for sure. But I'm wondering if it's some of maybe as you mentioned, some of the designated students, whether it's behavior or whatever it may be, maybe it's using some of our support staff. So if it is a behavior there's some behavior designated kids that are really finding it tricky, have our behavior teacher come into your class, do the thing, and then you take those kids that are kind of struggling with behavior and do that with them. So rather than him just working with the behavior designated kids, have him come and work with all your kids and you do that, right? Yeah. And I know that gets tricky, in a school this size, or even admin or whatever, whatever support staff could help with that, rather than feeling like you have to kind of, I don't know if that helps. And that might be kind of pie in the sky, and it sounds good in
no, it helps. And I think that's our hope, is that we kind of normalize the conversations of these cogens amongst our staff members, and that I could just say, I'm hoping to run a cogen with this group of students. Do you mind coming in and helping facilitate in this lesson? Right. I think that's our hope at CNB.
Yeah. Or even working with another teacher that's on a prep and say, can you do this for me now? And then when it's my prep, I can, swap that off. Just finding those times in a sharesies kind of way.
Yeah.
Welcome back. All right. I don't know about you all. We had a lot of emotion in our room, but it felt important and really part of the process. And so we're going to close with Amanda and Heidi each taking a couple of minutes to witness, and then we'll close out and share a survey with you all. Amanda, you want to start?
Sure, thank you. I wanted to begin by acknowledging and thanking both Shane and Jamila for coaching us through this. This process has been beautiful, and I can feel Both schools really working and trudging through the process and learning and uncovering so much along the way. I really appreciated opening up and hearing the process of students and how they received the cogen, and then what the challenges were to go along with that. The main message that I heard today was rooting back to our equity challenge and refining the process. And I feel like students in this process a little bit, because I use that language with my own students in the classroom, that we acquired the information, we're developing our understanding, and then we go back and we refine it. And I feel like we're sitting in that process very much so right now. And I appreciate that you also acknowledge, Shane and Jamila, that there's some time in that, and that maybe we need to continue sitting in this cogen moment and going back and refining that. So thank you. The tips were really helpful, number 1 and 2. And what do I have here? Shifting our frame of thinking from deficit to asset has also been really enlightening today. It came up a few times and it's speaking volumes to me. I think that's what I have. And I think that I'm going to end it there because I know that Heidi wants to say the same.
Thank you. Beautiful job. Thank you, Heidi.
Echoing gratitude for Shane and Jamila, and also all of the teachers here. Like, I think I'm in a little bit of a winter, and you know, those of us that are admin in here, just acknowledge that you guys are the ones that are in the classroom and working with the students. And I'm just so incredibly humbled and grateful for the work that you do with our students. So thank you for that. Yeah, a few things today, that kind of themes that I connected with, and then once you do that, they kind of seem to pop up often. So the first one was just, it's messy. Like, it's all a process, and it's messy, and it's messy for our students, and it's messy for us. And then it's messy that it's messy because we don't like that, right? So just, I guess, normalizing that it's messy, and that's really okay. It's all a process, and it's all a journey. So that was a big thing that kind of stood out for me today. The second one was kind of hearing that repeatedly, is that kids have the ideas and the solutions. So let's listen and trust them, because they really do have it. I loved the example of those kiddos, Jamila, that you shared, and they just got, well, yeah, that's a really good idea. We're working together, and that was awesome. But they just were authentically excited about that, which is so cool to see and hear. And then the third one, Amanda and I were secretly, playfully arguing, because that was the one that I wanted to say too, like shifting that lens from deficit to asset, and like with our students, with ourselves, with the practices that we're using. It just came up in so many different ways today, and how we can, when we shift that lens to like really seeing things as an asset. It's that two-sided coin was a big one. So thank you.
Oh, I was muted. I was saying thank you. You both did such a beautiful job. Jamila, do you have any closing words before we go over just the next steps?
Yes, two things. One is, you know what's so interesting? This is super messy, but like take like 5 seconds. Don't you notice all the ways you're changing though at the same time? Like how concrete it is in some of the ways that you're changing in your practice. I just heard Amanda say, you know, as we're thinking about this cogen, it's really hard to figure out the logistics, but then it would be really nice. It was like normalized for us to do cogens, and then the logistics would be easier if it was normalized, but we can't really normalize it if we don't try the practice, right? So I thought that was really cool. And I just want to acknowledge the messiness and like the 50 million ways that you keep naming the changes that you're making at the same time in your body and soul. And then the second thing I just want to name is like just a strong, firm affirmation that we recognize your humanity and the amount you are investing in this work. We are very, very aware of this, and we like If there's a time where, oh, I didn't get to do this thing, or it wasn't perfect, or whatever it is, that's okay. It really, really is okay. We are grateful to be with you on this learning journey. So I just want to affirm that really firmly with you all, and just say thank you for being in today's space and going on this journey with us. Shane.
Yeah, double tap on all of that. I think I just want to acknowledge the emotion in the work. And, you know, I'm going to try not to get too emotional, but it's supposed to hurt. Like you are trying to dismantle systems of oppression that have really dehumanized a lot of your students. And so it's not going to be easy when you actually push up against that stuff. And when you're willing to have the kind of conversations that actually transform students' experiences so they can say, I do belong here. I do see myself in this classroom. I feel seen and loved. Like, how many children leave school and can't say that? So I just want to honor that the emotion is real, and it's also, and to normalize it, right? We don't have to be afraid of that, but we do have to support each other and hold each other through it.